This will be the reflections notes for 8th grade. So just going through this, it says find the coordinates and reflect over the x-axis. So for reflections, they're always going to give us an axis which we've got to go over. This particular one tells us that we're going to be going over the x-axis. So my recommendation is highlight or identify your x-axis one way or another. What we're going to do is we're going to treat it just like a mirror. We're going to make a mirror image of the shape that we've already got. Well, how I'm going to do this, I'm going to look at point A right here. And I can see that point A is 1, 2, 3, 4 away from the x-axis. If I was on the other side of that mirror, what I would expect is A prime to be 1, 2, 3, 4 away from that mirror as well. So that would be A prime there. Looking at B, here's point B, and B is 1, 2 away from the x-axis. So B prime would also be 1, 2 away from the x-axis. And finally, here's C. So C is 1 away, so I would expect C prime to also be 1 away. Now, if I connect the dots on these, you can see that I've got the same shape, same size. They're actually congruent, but they are just mirror opposites of each other. So here's what I'm going to do. I want to look at the coordinates for A and A prime, and I want you guys to, I'm going to do it with actually all the points, and I want you to see what the difference is so we can come up with our own algebraic representation. So for A, coordinate A is at -4, and looks like +4. B is at 1, 2. C is at -2, 1. So now I'm going to look at my primes. A prime is at -4, -4. B prime is at +1, -2. C prime is at -2, -1. Now, to come up with our algebraic representation, this is the real tricky part. We got to look at the difference between our coordinates, what we started with and what we came up with. What I want you to see is between here and here, all we did is it went negative. Same thing here. Those went negative. Even here, it just changed, and it went negative. So it's changing sign. All of the x's, because these are xy pairs, all of the x's stayed the exact same. So when I'm coming up with the algebraic representation, I would expect x to remain the same. To show that y changed, actually I'm going to change that in blue because we're talking about, well, actually it doesn't really matter on that one. Our y's, they changed sign. From here to here, the sign changed. So y is going to be negative. That's our algebraic representation. We're going to do the same thing on number 2. So let's get the coordinates first this time around. So A is going to be -4, -1. B is going to be -3, +2. C is going to be -1, -2. All right, now I'm going to be doing the same thing. We're doing it over the x-axis. This is a little more tricky only because the x-axis right there in the middle, and we are reflecting pretty much on top of ourselves. We're going to do it the exact same way. So I'm going to kind of do it how I did before. We did the original with blue. So I'm going to count how far away A is from the x-axis. Well, it's only 1 away. So A prime is also going to be 1 away. So there's A prime. B is 1, 2 away. So B prime is going to be 1, 2 away. There's B prime. C prime, I know it's on the opposite side. Well, actually, we already did that with A and B. But C is 1, 2 away. So I would expect C prime to be 1, 2 away. Again, I'm going to connect the dots. Unfortunately, on this one, it's kind of on top of itself. But you can still see that it's the same image, just reflected on top of itself, which is kind of a pain. It's a little more difficult to see, but not too bad. So now we're going to come up with the primes. So A prime is at -4, +1. B prime is at -3, yeah, -3, -2. And C prime is going to be at -1, +2. So now I'm going to compare my points and come up with my algebraic representation. Looking at my x values, I have all my negatives right here. I have all of my negatives right here. So nothing changed about x. X remained the exact same. I'll do this without the highlighter. Now I've got to check y. Looking at my y's, we went from -1 to +1. Not worried about whether it's a negative or not, but it did change sign. Same thing here. We went from +2 to -2. Here we went from -2 to +2. So it doesn't really matter whether it's negative or positive. The point is the sign changed. So to show that the sign changes, we're going to put a negative in front of that y. So just like before, when we reflect over the x-axis, the algebraic representations remain the same. Now on number 3, we are going to be reflecting over the y-axis. So this time around, instead of flipping up and down, we're going straight across. I'm going to go ahead and start by getting my points for A, B, and C. So A is at 1, 2. B is at 4, 5. If I can draw my 5 a little bit better than that. There we go. And C is at 3, -1. Now, to find my primes, we're going to do it the same way. I'm going to reflect them. I'm going to see how far away they are from the axis. So A is 1 away from the axis. So I'm going to make it 1 away on this side. This will be A prime. B is 1, 2, 3, 4 away from the axis. So B prime will be 1, 2, 3, 4 away from the axis. Same thing with C prime. I'm sorry, C. So here's 1, 2, 3 away. So C prime will be 1, 2, 3 places away. I'm going to connect my dots and make sure that I've actually got a reflection on this. So same image, same shape, same size. Nothing is different about it. It's just been reflected. It looks like a mirror image. So now for my coordinates for the primes. A prime is at -1, +2. B prime is at -4, +5. C prime is at -3, -1. Alright, now, algebraic representation. Keep in mind, this time around we went across the y-axis. So go ahead and make your guess what you think the algebraic representation from reflecting across the x-axis to reflecting across the y-axis. So I'm going to look at my points. On my x's, those are all positive. These are all negative. So the x is what's changing. So my x's changed sign. Now I'm going to look at my y's. We have 2 positives and a negative, and here we have 2 positives and a negative. Nothing changed about those. So my y is going to remain the exact same. Whatever y I start with is the y that I end with. So you can see, comparing those two algebraic representations, just to make sure you can see what I'm talking about, that one and that one, if I'm reflecting across the x-axis, my y is what's going to change the sign. If I'm reflecting across my y-axis, my x is what's going to change sign. Going to continue doing a few more examples. So on number 4, I'm going to look at my, let's get my values of x and a, b, and c first. So a is -2, -1. B is 0, 2. C is 1, -3. Now for my primes. So this time around, we're going across the y-axis. So I need to make sure I highlight. I gotta make sure I know which one I'm doing in the first place, but we're going across the y-axis this time around. So, starting with A. A is 1, oh, I meant to do that in color. 1, 2 away from the y-axis. So A prime will be 1, 2 away from the y-axis. B is already on the y-axis, so there's really nothing to reflect on that one. So B is going to stay right where it's at. So this is going to be B prime as well. It's kind of imagine putting your hand on a mirror. Well, your hand is already there. There's nothing to really change about it. for C, C is one place away, so C prime will also be one place away. Now I'm going to connect my dots. Same image, just been reflected. So now I'm going to write down my coordinates for my primes. So A prime is at 2, negative 1. B prime is at 0, 2. C prime is at negative 1, negative 3. And again, I'm coming up with my algebraic representation. So I'm going to look at my y values first. Out of all my y's right here, I've got negative, 0, and 1. Here I've got positive, 0, and 1. Well, outside of the zeros, the other two have changed sign. 0 is neither positive nor negative, so it having a negative or a positive on it doesn't really make a difference. So we can still say that everything changed sign on the x's. Now for the y's, I have a negative, positive, and a negative, and over here I have a negative, a positive, and a negative. So nothing changed about my y's, and it will remain the same. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, just so you know for the others, if it's a reflection across the y-axis, it's always going to be x that changes. If it's a reflection across the x-axis, it's always going to be the y that changes. Final two. I want to change it up just a little bit this time. Because we just went over the algebraic representation, I already know that it's going to be the x that changes sign and the y that will remain the same. So this time, I want to get the points for my originals and see if I can come up with the new points without having to just graph it. So A is 1, negative 1. B is 2, negative 2. C is going to be 2, negative 5. Now, according to my algebraic representation, all of my x values, these right here, should change sign. So for my new one, I should have a negative 1, a negative 2, and another negative 2. Now for my old one, for the y side, those should all remain the same. So I should still have negative 1, negative 2, and negative 5 whenever I plot these. So now I'm going to go over here. I'm going to plot my primes and see how this works out. Just a quick reminder, we're going over the the y-axis. So here's my y-axis. Now I'm going to plot these points. So A prime is at negative 1, negative 1. That looks good so far. B prime is at negative 2, negative 2. Still looking good. C prime is at negative 2 and negative 5. So by doing this the other way, you can see that we still get the same kind of image. It's just been reflected over the y-axis now. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one because we're going to go over the x-axis this time. So my original points, A is at negative 3, negative 1. B is at positive 2, negative 1. C is at negative 1, negative 4. And our reflection over the x-axis, we already know that our algebraic representation, if we reflect over x, y changes. So x will stay the same, and y will change sign. So now what I'm going to do, since all of my x's are going to stay the same, I'm talking about this part right here. X stays the same. All of those will stay the same. So my negative 3, positive 2, and my negative 1 will all stay just like that. For my y side, these all have to change sign. So from negative 1, I'm going to go to positive 1, and positive 4. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to graph these out. And just a reminder that we are going over the x-axis. So we should be going across right here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and plot these points. Negative 3, positive 1 is going to be my A prime. 2, 1 is going to be my B prime. And negative 1, positive 4 is going to be my C prime. Connect the dots. And let's see, I get the exact same image as before, just across the x-axis instead. If you're still struggling with this, guys, make sure you ask me when you're working on the homework section. For the homework section, you're going to have two things that I want you to do. One of them is going to get pretty repetitive pretty quick. I need you to write down the algebraic representation and graph the new point. You have to give me both of those. I'm not asking you guys to give me all the coordinates and everything. Just give me the graph and tell me what the algebraic representation is. I'm going to help you on a couple of these just to get you going. This first one is having us reflect across the y-axis. So I know I'm going to go across the y-axis. In fact, actually, I want you to highlight the axis too. Our algebraic representation, if we're reflecting over the y-axis, we are going to use the same algebraic representation every time. X will change to the opposite, y will stay the same. So that part's done. Now I just got to plot the new points. So here, a is 1 away, so a prime will also be 1 away. I think that's an A. It's really hard to tell on mine. I can't really tell what these letters are, so I'm not even going to worry about that. To me, that kind of looks like an F, so I'm going to go with F right here, which doesn't really make any sense for that being an F, but whatever. And then D is 1, 2, I meant to do that in blue. 1, 2, 3, 4 away. So 1, 2, yeah, colors won't change. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's D prime. And that looks like Y is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away. Now I'm going to connect my dots. And my image is graphed. So 3 things that I'm looking for. I know I said 2 before, but I do want to make sure you're doing all of these. I need the image, I need the algebraic representation, and I need the axis that you're flipping across. I need that thing highlighted. Do a couple more just to get you guys going on this thing. On this one, again, reflecting across the y-axis, except I meant to highlight that and not mark that out. But since we're reflecting across the y-axis, I know that my x is what's going to change, so my algebraic representation shouldn't be too bad. X changes, y stays the same. So, one part done. Now I've got to highlight the y-axis that I'm flipping across. And if I could select the stuff that I'm trying to today. There we go. Now, each of these, I'm not going to do all the lines this time around. I can see that T is 1 away, so I'm going to go 1 away. There's F. And then the other one is 1, 2, 3, 4 away. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 away. I think that's F prime. That looks like a Y. That kind of looks like a T. Connect the dots. And done.